And we are back. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network, here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center on the mean streets of Providence, the city we love, 90 Way Bassett Street, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. And this week, given what went on in Halitosis Hall, we are a state torn asunder, if you will, civil war between both houses. And that's going to be an issue we're going to address in our next segment when Maura Jane Walsh, Democratic State Representative, joins us via telephone to talk about last week's madness. There's madness afoot here in La Prave. But this is an event I've been waiting for a long time, and the interest in this is accelerated because of, I'll say, events happening in Planet Libertarian over the last few weeks. And folks who are listening to this show for the first time, again, my name is Pat Ford. I am the host here. Full disclosure, I am chairman of the Rhode Island Libertarian Party. I didn't know it until a few weeks ago, but I am a lifelong libertarian. Somebody just had to explain it to me. Ironically, it was some guy named Gary Johnson, who I called into in 2012 on a late night talk show, as I want to do in Boston. And when he explained to me what he believed in, it was an epiphany for me. I realized that I believe in personal liberty. I believe in small government. Most importantly, I believe in the right to self-determination. I believe in the right for people to make their own decisions. As libertarians, and this is coming from me, we don't endorse any behavior. We simply acknowledge, we don't give you, we acknowledge the right for you to make your own personal lifestyle choices. And as a result, we see no need for someone else in the form of government, whether it be elected or self-appointed, to tell you themselves. We call that being an audacious libertarian, and joining me on the live is someone I truly believe to be an audacious libertarian. She's that libertarian, and she's contemplating a run for the United States Senate as an L, as a libertarian, against a couple of odd hangers-on in the Republican Party and somebody named Claire McCaskill. Of course, she is Alicia Dearn. Welcome to the Coalition, Alicia.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction.
Well, no, it's well earned. We didn't have the chance to meet in Orlando. I was there. Tony, who runs the board back there, was there. And so that's when we first became acquainted with Alicia Dearn. You ran for the vice presidency nomination. You came within a hairbreadth. You are a contender. And folks like yourself really are the future of the libertarian movement. Let's start from scratch. First of all, very impressive legal background. You're a graduate of the University of Washington. You're a graduate of of San Diego, the University of San Diego School of Law. You were law review there. You are, on a legal basis, admitted essentially to practice everywhere, including on planets far afield. You're licensed to practice before the Supreme Court. Pretty much just about every court, I'm looking at the list here, every U.S. Court of Appeals that matters, every U.S. District Court that matters across the western reach of the United States. You're based in St. Louis, hence your Missouri-based, the show me state. But let's go back to the very beginning. You're an accomplished lawyer. At the same time, you've managed, I'll say, what other people have claimed to do, which is literally, I think the quote was, you've occupied just about every role possible as a libertarian. Tell us, what was your libertarian movement? How does a young, aggressive attorney become a libertarian?
Well, I got to tell you, I was a libertarian from childhood. My dad actually is a libertarian and raised me right. my first voter registration, I registered libertarian. So I was already libertarian, but I did not become active in the party until 2011. Mm-hmm. Now I'll tell you what it was. I worked for large law firms. I had a pretty good career working for some of the biggest law firms in the country, not just in the country, in the world. But I, at some point, got the entrepreneurial bug. And so I went out on my own, and I actually had a couple of businesses, including a failed.com. I like technology. And of course, my law firm. So in the crash of the economy, I saw so many of my clients just struggling. I mostly represent small businesses, some mid-sized businesses, but mostly small businesses. So I'm talking to the people who are the owners, the people who put in the sweat equity, who put their houses on the line to create jobs and to create things in this country. And all those people were suffering under not just the bad economic conditions, but this gargantuan pile of regulations, terrible tax, especially in the state of California, which is where I'm originally from. And I just started getting really frustrated and angry about it. So one day I was talking to my uncle, who used to be very active in the Democratic Party in politics, and I was telling him how frustrated I was, and I feel like I have to do something. He says to me, you would really like this guy named Gary Johnson. So I looked up Governor Johnson and saw he was running, and immediately volunteered for his campaign, and that was right when I moved to Missouri. And pretty much from there, the rest is history, so they say. I became Missouri State Director, and then I became Midwest Director, and then I became General Counsel all within a few months. And from that point forward, just very active.
Now, your law firm, and let me see if I get this right, it's the Bellatrix Law Firm. Of course, I have to ask you the question that first occurred to me when I first saw that, actually last year. Are you named after your firm, I should say, named after the Harry Potter star, or after the actual star? Where did you derive that name from?
I get that question a lot. I actually have not read the Harry Potter books or really watched the movies. So I named my firm. I was aware of the character when I named my firm, but it is named after the star. It's also Latin for female warrior.
Right.
So it's supposed to embody what a law firm is in my mind, which is we guide and serve our clients. So Bellatrix is one of the guiding stars in Orion. It's the basis for luminary measure. So it was symbolic in that way. And then I liked the Latin name as well, because I'm obviously a woman in the firm and I am a warrior.
Absolutely. Now, what's interesting about your firm is two perspectives. Number one, you, in many cases, if I understand it right, you actually serve as sort of their in-house counsel on an outsourced basis. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I think that's a dynamite idea, because there are so many small firms that have to struggle with this overwhelming. You'd have to go back to a certain day, but years ago there was a FedEx commercial where waves of paperwork swept people down the halls and overran them. And I'll always point out there, and I'm biased on this count, there are two types of people in the world: those who've had to make payroll and those who haven't. And until you've had that terrifying, awesome, satisfying, earth-shattering experience of having to make payroll week in, week out, I don't know if you can truly understand the challenges of small business, particularly as they're being faced in this country today. I think, and I love your opinion on this. We as a nation have gone from a point in time where small business was celebrated. Folks men or women who ran small businesses were often local celebrities or pointed out to as role models because of their involvement in the community at so many different levels in so many cases. Yet the current political climate and government at large now seeks to vilify some of those same people. What happened?
People still have, in general, a good feeling towards small business, but there's this real, I hate to say it, but it's kind of a dirty word, but it's a socialist feeling that the employer is supposed to take care of the employee, and that has just grown. So my first area of law that I practice in is employment law. I've expanded from there, but I have just seen over and over and over again this idea that the employer is somehow beholden to take care of every need of the employee, and it's no longer this exchange of labor for money. It's no longer this economic exchange. It's somehow this parent-child type relationship, and it drives me crazy as an employer. I want my employees to be adults, and I want us to work together fairly. But especially in a place like California, it's every little thing that comes up, I've got to be sensitive to their needs, and that always comes out of my pocketbook. So I don't think it's that there's a disdain for small business. I think that there's this heavy burden on employers specifically and for businesses, and it's this idea that we have all the money and can take care of everybody else. Right,
this sort of cradle-to-grave philosophy that's forced on people as opposed to being embraced by those folks successful enough to provide it if they so choose.
Right.
Your campaign now, you're I guess in the earliest stages of the campaign. I guess the word often used is exploratory. What is the legal status of your effort, and what are the stages now that you're going to go through over the next few weeks to really evaluate the situation?
I think that's a great question. So I'm literally 48 hours into this exploratory committee. Now, I got to tell you, this is almost entirely volunteer driven. What happened, I wasn't actually intending to run for this office. I wasn't sure what I was going to run for. I was planning to do something, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And I got this groundswell of support in the last couple of days where I literally had hundreds of people ask me. They were texting me, they were messaging me on Facebook, they're asking me if I would consider running for office, for this specific office for Senate in Missouri. And so with that kind of support, I thought, you know, there's a call here and I really should consider it. So I said, all right, to one of my friends who said, I think you should do it. And I said, all right, I'll think about it. And literally 10 minutes later, there was a Facebook page up. I don't even think I'm on the page. And then I was really humbled by the response that I got. I mean, we already have significant pledges and donations. We already have lots of likes on the page, and I'm getting all this positive feedback. So that's given me a lot of excitement for this race. So I think, you know, if things continue in that trajectory, then, you know, I might make a formal announcement. What I need in order to do that is we're going to, you know, I'll be looking at seriously at the infrastructure. You know, can we pull together the volunteers? Can we pull together the donations in order to make a serious run that's good for the Libertarian Party? You know, we all know the challenges of ballot access. We all know the challenges of debates and media blackouts and things like that. So I'm looking at, you know, our opportunities and seeing if this is something that I can do where my efforts here will actually give us a net positive. Because I always give lots of efforts to the Libertarian Party, but I want to make sure that the efforts that I'm giving are the best efforts that I have to offer with the best results.
Now, you know, to stipulate a couple of things, very often we hear candidates or politicians talk about the groundswell of communications they've received, the phone calls they've gotten. And we all kind of know in the back of our minds that, yeah, all right, whatever. I personally got involved in this because I'm on some of the same groups, some of the same email lists, some of the same chatter that you are, Alicia, even though we haven't met before. And I saw it firsthand, this sort of, and it's funny because we're libertarians, we're somewhat Spock-like in that we're not emotional, right? I saw a truly emotional response over the last 48 hours after a series of events that almost, you know, what would be the saying? Run, Alicia, run. You know, which has got to be gratifying and humbling at the same time. We're not a party or a group of people who are prone to that sort of quick, sudden rush. But let me stipulate that Mark Wicks, who some of you who are non-libertarians may even be familiar with, who ran, I believe, a highly successful campaign in Montana, was a recipient of some of that same love. I think the Wicks campaign, where people, once he was going to be precluded from participation in the only televised debate, where people seemingly rose up out of nowhere for states that state that most of us will never actually visit, found themselves on the phone badgering, literally in my case, on the cell phone with his poor station manager somewhere in a place in Montana that sounds lovely but I'll never visit, telling him he's got to have Mark Wicks on. That same sort of almost collegial team national spirit seems to be rising up and coalescing, in this case, around your candidacy. And that's wonderful on so many different levels, because it speaks to, number one, the notion that we're finally moving beyond our territorial obsession. Number two, we see the bigger picture, and this is where I want to get into issues. The opportunity at the federal level, at the highest level, if you will, of government in this land, to have a libertarian articulate a true libertarian vision and message is an opportunity that's too good to pass up, yet at the same time is going to present to you on a personal level enormous financial and personal challenges. It's easy for me to say, run, Alicia, run, but at the same time, this is a hell of a commitment on your behalf, isn't it?
Absolutely. And yes, you're right. It's very humbling to have this kind of excitement around me, and frankly surprises me. I'm actually kind of an introverted person, so it surprises me that I've got, you know, this much love being thrown at me. I do appreciate it, but you're right. It's a lot of effort. It's physical and financial. It means time away from my family, time away from my business. And, I've sacrificed a lot over the years to the Libertarian Party. So when I first told my husband, I have to tell you, his reaction was not that favorable. He was like, I don't think so. I've got a few weeks to convince him if it all looks good that it won't be so bad. But yeah, it is a great sacrifice. But you're right. We have these moments and these opportunities as a party, and they don't happen that often. And when we have them, we got to grab them because that's where we get the momentum.
Right. And I think, by the way, we've all had those spousal moments when you operate at a certain level in the libertarian universe. Where you, in your case, well, as we like to say in here in Rhode Island, you become libertarian fabulous. So when you become libertarian fabulous, it is definitely a mixed bag. Lots of people reach out to you in all sorts of ways that you had never anticipated. I personally became libertarian fabulous for a day during the campaign, and I had my personal cell phone number blasted all over Facebook. Magic moments. In a surprise, and I think that gentleman, if he listened to this, he'll know who he was. By the way, I took every call and I made friends that night. So there you go. So it can be humbling. It can also be ennobling. But here's the issue. It's as libertarians, we scream bloody murder for an opportunity to broadcast to the world our libertarian ideals. Some of our disappointments, and I'm not going to obsess over the 2016 election, was that we're not sure if we got every opportunity to express those libertarian ideals, if we took advantage of them. Let's go full-blown wonk. Let's talk about the issues that you'll be given an opportunity to address head-on. All right, head-on, right in your grill, smash mouth, wonk politics. What are the issues really that matter to Alicia Dearn that she's going to bring first and foremost into the civilian world, if you will?
So probably the top of my list, well, there's a couple things that are top of my list. Obviously, I really care about the business regulations, overtaxation, and employment and wage laws, which come up not just in Missouri, but elsewhere. But I think Missouri is also a really key state to be talking about criminal justice reform and the drug war. We have a lot of race relation problems in Missouri. We have high incarceration rates in Missouri. We have, and those incarceration rates are heavily, leaning towards minorities who are having their whole lives ruined because of the drug war. Mm-hmm. And frankly, a lot of the regulations that we have prevent those people from getting jobs and starting businesses and having education and things like that. So we have huge poverty problems in the state of Missouri, particularly in places like Kansas City and St. Louis, where we have inner cities. And, the Department of Justice is coming in and saying that our police departments are racist and that they need to take over all these suburbs of St. Louis because of things that are happening with the Black populations there and the police departments. And it's the birthplace of Black Lives Matter, right? Mm-hmm. Ferguson, right there in St. Louis. So I think that you're going to get sick of hearing me talk about how the drug war and also to some other extent some of these regulations that we have is actually creating this hostile environment between the police force and minority communities, and that it's really a civil rights violation against our minorities to be putting them in jail and ruining their lives for nonviolent crimes, and creating generation after generation of people who cannot get out of welfare, cannot get out of poverty, cannot find jobs because they're stuck in the criminal justice system.
Yeah, we will never get sick of you talking about that. Believe me. We're big fans of a guy named Judge Jim Gray here. Organizations like LEAP and all of their efforts to finally end the
I'll tell you,
failed war on drugs.
I do a lot of radio and television with Republicans, and they get sick of hearing me talk about it. I'm constantly saying the drug war is a major problem, you guys, and their response is, well, we don't do drugs, and people need to be moral, and if we legalize drugs, then everybody's going to be doing drugs, and all the responses to that. And I just say, look, you want to stop having these altercations between the police and our minority communities. Take out the thing that's escalating the violence.
Right.
It's easy.
No, the war on drugs is such an abject failure on so many levels. And why I'm excited about your candidacy is because this is an issue that ultimately, at some point in time, regardless of state, Supreme Courts or their equivalents deciding otherwise, the final battle, the end of the war on drugs, is going to have to take place at the federal level. It just is. And a gentleman, and I'll use that term loosely, who's a member of the chamber that you should be joining soon, because really you are let's be honest here, you are the only legitimate contender taking on Claire McCaskill. All reports to the contrary otherwise. We need to, as the Libertarian Party, point out the flaws in this. Is it the government's job at any point to make decisions on the individual for lifestyle decisions? Is that their job at all?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And even just as a matter of federalism, why is the federal government involved in legislating drugs and legislating marijuana? In Missouri, we haven't legalized marijuana yet. We get closer every election cycle, but in the city of St. Louis, they stopped enforcing the criminal laws on it because the jails were so overburdened. Right. That it was literally a due process violation. We started getting opinions from the American Bar Association, from all the watchdog groups, that we can't even assign enough public defenders that the state can pay for to defend all of these nonviolent criminals. So right. The city just stopped, and it's not like all of a sudden St. Louis became this, burnt out place because we're not enforcing marijuana laws there right. anymore. Right. So Missouri is like the perfect place it's the perfect state to really carry that banner and make the charge at the federal level that pursuing these drug laws, and probably we have to start with marijuana, but I think all drugs should be legalized. It just causes far more harm than the good that it does, and we have data on this. This is not an issue of speculation. This is not an issue of us being, liking, a bunch of people who are libertine, who want to use drugs because, we're partiers or whatever. This is about human life at a very real level, about civil rights, about how we treat our poor people in this country, and how we treat our police state. And if people don't get that, then, if I'm in the Senate, they're going to be hearing it a lot. Completely against Jeff Sessions escalating the drug war again.
Right. And that's why the Senate is so important to this, because let's look at all the unintended consequences, or some would say intended consequences. Number one, its impact on our foreign relations. We effectively, by taking this 1920s era prohibition model and extrapolating against victimless crimes, in this case the use of marijuana and most drugs, when there's no violation, as we say as libertarians, of the NAP, when no one else is being harmed, we have essentially created an entire section of the world ripe for narco-terrorism, which is, again, under the Senate purview, because that's directly impacting our foreign relations. Right. We have created a public health crisis in this nation because, let's just say that folks who are involved in black market drugs don't exactly follow market-enforced licensing or documentation guidelines. Maybe a shock, but some of them might be. We have a fentanyl crisis all of a sudden in this nation. We have an opioid crisis in this nation, all of which is this schizophrenic approach to how we approach the use of a personal lifestyle substance by the individual. And it's right. It's cost us, as you pointed out so aptly, race relations. It's cost us billions in interdiction. The DEA is a gigantic slush fund for the government. And so we're better to fight Jeff Sessions because, sorry, again, this is the opinion of me, station management, Jeff Sessions, as far as I'm concerned, politically, on a civil rights basis and on an intellectual level, is the Antichrist. He is just, I won't call him evil, but his behavior and his approach to all of this is inexplicable, and right. Which is why we need a voice at the Senate. So please don't ever feel shy about that. That issue speaks to so many of our libertarian values on so right. many different levels.
And you're completely right about it impacting our foreign policy, which is not something that doesn't get discussed enough. I mean, look, we're still in Afghanistan burning down poppy fields. And what does that do? It makes all those people in Afghanistan hate Americans and want to perpetuate terrorism against us. Why? Because we don't want to have opiates in the country. It's just ridiculous. I can't even express how absurd this action is and how much of a human cost it has. It's probably, to me, the biggest issue because of the absolute destructive power it has had across all spectrums of human life, both national and abroad.
Right, and we've got something as someone who's licensed to practice before the Supreme Court of the United States. I'd like to remind our Republican friends that the Constitution does not begin and end at the Second Amendment. That there's a whole variety of subject matter that one can contemplate, if you will, around our civil rights as enumerated. In this case, the Fourth Amendment. That there is a Fourth Amendment. How do you feel about stop and frisk?
I'm against stop and frisk. I think that we have the Fourth Amendment on purpose, which is there's supposed to be a warrant for searching people.
Right.
So our police are far too often breaking into our property, breaking into our cars, stopping our cars, sending drug dogs around, stopping us and harassing us on the sidewalks. There's checkpoints in California that are supposedly immigration checkpoints. How is any of that constitutional?
Right. It's simply not. And we've got a president who, what was the quote? It was a very bad, not good judge that threw out stop and frisk in New York City. Right. That level. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Trump doesn't get it. He doesn't get it because he's, as a billionaire, he's never been harassed by the police. But the rest of us schmoes walking around minding our own business, we're getting bothered. And it's just not right. This country was built on the idea that it's far better to let a guilty person go than to harass and violate the rights of a free man.
Well, that's thank you, thank you for that. So clearly, the Justice Department, how it's currently being run, if I can dignify it with that term, is going to be one of your political targets as far as during the campaign.
Absolutely. Obviously, I have a background in it as a lawyer, and I just think that Missouri is really ground zero for suffering in how our criminal justice is being handled.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. Now, how do you, this is, of course, the challenge of the Libertarian Party. What are some of the ideas you have on how to just take that message and just drive it home? Because one of the things I've enjoyed watching you over the last year or two that I've been semi-involved at the national level, if you will, is the notion that you're willing to focus on issues. What are some ideas as your campaign started to contemplate how you do that? And as a result, in your run-up to your decision formally to announce, how important is it that libertarians across the country take this opportunity to help finance that effort? So give us some ideas how you're going to do it and just what you think you're going to need to accomplish it.
So my last run, when I was running for vice president, I started talking about this term compassionate libertarianism. And what I really meant by that was talking about real world problems, using people and their stories as examples, and discussing how libertarianism actually addresses their issues and makes their lives better. So, for example, I would want to talk about the issues in the inner city in St. Louis where I live. And I see actually on a regular basis, because I live right there with the minority population, with the poor people who can't start a business because there's regulations on whether they can fix a car in their own front yard, right. And we have so many regulations in St. Louis and several of its suburbs that nobody can get out from underneath the burden of tickets. They can't start businesses, they can't braid hair, they can't they can't rehab their houses. We have beautiful buildings that are crumbling. Why? Because government is in the way. And I think when you put a human face on that, and it's not an abstract intellectual discussion, but really one of, meet John Doe, my neighbor, who here is suffering in abject poverty because government does X, Y, and Z, and you give that kind of story, then people start paying attention. They start feeling and understanding why it is that pernicious government is so just wrong. It's unethical for us to be standing in the way as a society on people's ability to feed themselves.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've nailed it. Traditionally, I should say, one of the channels, one of the ways that first-generation immigrants to the United States helped to lift their families out of poverty was through the use of personal services and or restaurants. And something as simple in so many cities across this country, we've had this controversy here in Rhode Island, the licensing required to perform basic personal services for a fee to a willing customer, in this case hair braiding, basic hair services, or restaurants. I mean, the barriers to entry that have been erected in front of these folks in order to be quote unquote compassionate is astonishing.
Right.
Self-employment traditionally has been one of the first steps up the ladder for folks who are immigrants to this country.
Right, absolutely. And that's what we need to be shining a light on. It's about inclusion. It's about the melting pot of this country. It's about free markets, give us innovation. I mean, one of the things about St. Louis, for example, is that it's actually one of the hotbeds for innovation and startups and technology. A lot of people don't know that, but we have all of these immigrants that come into a couple of world-class universities there who are like software coders and things like that, who are creating all this great stuff. We have a lot of biosciences there, and more people would be involved in things like that. They'd be involved in manufacturing and like you said, the simple services and things like that. And the city would see itself lift more out of poverty if we simply just made it easier to get into business.
There's a very compelling picture of you on the net where you're holding a sign that says, "I'm against the next war already," or words to that effect. Talk about, as a United States Senator, obviously you're going to be intimately involved in the foreign policy decisions of this nation. Where have we gone so very, very wrong?
Well, we're just engaging in too much foreign interventionism. Look, the Libertarian Party is a party of peace, and one of the things I think that did frustrate me a little bit from our last cycle is that we aren't talking about that enough. That we're the party of peace. We don't want to be bombing Syrians and all those children that we were just seeing pictures of. We don't want to be the cause of that. We don't want to be the cause of embargoes in Cuba causing people to starve. So, where do I think we've gone wrong? Well, we've engaged in realpolitik and what we call preemptive defense, and really have been doing all this nation building and putting our armies all over the world, and it's just making everybody else mad. It's causing bloodshed. I don't think that is the best foreign policy for the United States. I don't think it's the most moral foreign policy for any country. We need to, libertarians are constantly called isolationists. I don't believe in isolation. I think we need to actively involved in the world stage, but that doesn't mean that we're constantly rolling our armies through every country that we don't agree with how they govern themselves, or how, even if there's a dictator, how that dictator governs the people, because all we're doing is bringing more death and destruction. So there's almost no moral justification for war. I believe in self-defense. I do not believe in aggression.
How ironic is it that a socialist Democrat named Barack Obama opened up Cuba to foreign trade, and an alleged free market capitalist Republican president is trying to close it?
Right. It's insane, And look, I understand the hurt that the Cuban people who come to America feel over the awful actions of Fidel Castro as a dictator. I know that we have libertarians who are trying to meet in Cuba, and they're being detained and they're being tortured and all kinds of awful things from a human rights standpoint. But embargoing them doesn't work. All it does is cause more human suffering. The path to prosperity and to freedom throughout the entire world is in free trade.
Right. I mean, capitalism is, I believe, the mechanism by which the individual can realize their full human potential for any one of a number of reasons. We need, as libertarians, that we need to espouse that. And I should emphasize free market capitalism, not the type of crony corporatism that seems to have taken over the failed Republican/Democratic model really over a couple of generations now. Any attempt at free market capitalism seems to have evaporated really post-Reagan administration. Yet so many folks will claim to be capitalists, just as many who claim to be liberty Republicans, as if that's not mutually incompatible terms. So foreign policy, we're going to take, in your eyes, we need to take a step back from nation building. We need, on a local Justice Department level, we need to step back and in a sense, divorce ourselves from the war on drugs as quickly as possible. What are some other issues that you'd like to really see, not just challenge when you become a United States Senator, but take the opportunity during the campaign to clearly articulate libertarian values and philosophy on? What are some other issues?
Well, I would like to talk about economic regulation. I think that there's too much. I particularly dislike the Department of Labor. Mm-hmm. I know that minimum wage is kind of a hotbed issue right now throughout the country. The state of Missouri has actually, the governor has actually reduced the minimum wage, which is a very unusual step after it had been raised, because of how many jobs it caused to be lost in the inner cities and how many small businesses it was immediately going to put out. So I think that's a step in the right direction. But I know far, far too much about the wage laws. I find them to be very harmful, not only to the small business, but to the people who are on the bottom rungs of the ladder. And so I would like to see those types of things repealed. And I can talk all about those types of regulations. I can talk about taxes all day long, probably bore people. But, as a business owner, I will tell you, the biggest expenses that I have, the biggest headaches that I have to do with taxes, specifically the payroll taxes, and with employment law. And those two things make it so that I don't want to hire. And I'm not the only one. That's what a lot of small businesses feel. And the big businesses too, frankly, like they're cutting back their workforces, they're automating things. If we want this country to be economically strong, which no doubt we do. I mean, there's so much pain right now in this country with unemployment and underemployment and flat wages and inflation, that we have to really be talking about what is causing this. And I think a lot of people in Washington, D.C. know what's causing this. They're just not being honest about it.
Well, we've gone from the 49-hour work week to the 29-hour work week. So many of our regulations essentially penalize companies for engaging in what is quote unquote desirable, and that would be full employment. And full employment, as we gauge it in the modern era, is a full 40-hour work week where you're getting compensated for 40 hours worth of work. Now, because of our health hours per week, the cost of the employer is potentially catastrophic.
Right.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
I see, my health insurance policy that I was carrying for my firm and my employees was canceled on me in mid-2000, I would say 15, and just suddenly canceled. The rates went up so high and it was canceled that I couldn't afford to replace it. And I have done all kinds of things to try to create healthcare benefits for my employees, and have not found any way to do that, and that's affordable, that helps me grow. And so I know that with healthcare skyrocketing for me, that's happening elsewhere for other small businesses. And so Obamacare is a disaster. I mean, all it did was just force more people into the single payer system, which I think is actually what they might have been trying to do anyway.
Right.
I'm not sure that Trump care is going to be any better. So it's funny that we sort of segued into that, but that's the other issue that I really think needs to be discussed, because the Republicans don't have any better of an answer to the healthcare crisis. The only way we're going to do better with healthcare is to give it back to the free market.
Well, and here's what's stunning to me. I think both you and I have Republican friends. And I asked them, those folks couldn't have been angrier. There couldn't have been more vitriol. There couldn't have been more disgust levied at the Obama administration. And for some cases, legitimate reasons. But during that entire 6 or 7 years that we've had post-Obamacare, during the entire 8 years of the Obama post-Bush administration, where is the plan waiting on autopilot to, as I like to say, click, file, print, and say, okay, this was our idea, and this is what we want to replace it? How does it not exist?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I remember a couple months ago when Trump care failed in the House, and Trump was trying to explain it. He says, well, it turns out that healthcare is very, very complicated. People make it so complicated. And I gotta tell you, my initial thought of that was everybody knew except for you. And you know why you don't know? Because you can afford to pay for private doctors.
Right.
He doesn't have to be stuck in the HMO system. But you're right. Why didn't the Republicans have something set up? Well, it's because of cronyism, I think.
Right. There's a lot of money to be made by big government. I mean, we rail all the time here on a local basis how many unregulated not-for-profits exist with little accountability as to their value or what they have to do to return their tax, based on their specialized tax-exempt status, and how much money you can make, again, air quotes, helping the poor, or advising people on how to help the poor. That's what government has created here in New England in the year 2017. We've got all the problems. Alicia, we've got a state so fundamentally broken here in Rhode Island that in the day before the 4th of July holiday, our human health and social services system, computer system, is completely broken. We had people in 95 plus degree heat lined around the building for hours at a time waiting for government, and the best, most polite way I can describe it is something out of Oliver Twist, literally saying, please, sir, may I have some more? All that was missing was the chorus line of food, glorious food. It's a Dickensian nightmare here in Rhode Island because of failed government, and I fear that that's exactly what's happening in St. Louis and actually across the country.
Right.
For you,
it makes me, on a personal level, it makes me afraid because I don't trust other people to provide for me. And maybe that's fundamentally why I'm a libertarian, is I want to have the control to provide for myself. Just, I will work, I will do what I need to do, just get out of my way. I have a right to feed and water and clothe and shelter myself. Right? And the idea of standing in a line and asking the government, please, will you let me have electricity? Please, will you let me have sustenance? Will you let me have health care? It feels like imprisonment to me. And I don't know how it can be tolerated.
Right. No, a mutual friend of ours on Facebook pointed out last week at the height of the outrage porn generated by Chris Christie and his Beachgate was, and of course I'm talking about Tom Simmons, who ran for Congress in Western Massachusetts. How did we get to the point where we actually believe as a society that we need government's permission to use and have access to a right as fundamental, and it is a right, to beach access here in the United States? How did we get to the point where we are so cowed by government that we stand there on the sidelines, with literally police contingents preventing us from, my God, taking a dip in the ocean? Is this going to be, in your mind, a generational change? How long will it take to reverse this mindset we're in?
I'm afraid that it's going to take a long time. We have been heading in this permission-based society direction for so long. I think for a century, we have been heading more and more towards big government, towards Marxism, and it's been a collective brainwashing. You're right, everything now, you have to ask permission for everything now. You have to ask permission to work, you have to ask permission to drive, to go places, to leave the country. How long until you have to ask permission to buy a house or whatever, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I do think that we have a serious problem culturally, and that the Libertarian Party is the only thing that's standing between us and being completely overrun by the state to the point where none of us are ever free.
This, to me, is sort of the top of the question, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. How important is it, and this is the big L versus the little l question, how important is it for us to take this opportunity as libertarians to evoke, through the mechanism of a political organization, designed to get people into positions of power where they can articulate a vision and also have the opportunity to execute it. How important is it for us to field candidates both on the local and the federal level as libertarians and not simply hide behind other organizations?
I think it's fundamentally critically important for us to start getting power, and I think the best way to do that is at the local level, where you can start impacting policy with less resistance. Obviously a Senate run, that's a high level run, and there are other goals that I might have, but until the Libertarian Party actually has elected positions and we start to turn politicians into libertarians, we're not going to see the growth that we need, and we're not going to be able to impact policy. And you don't have to be the majority to impact policy. We just need to have enough power that we can create coalitions, that we can be noisy, that our voices are heard, and that starts to swing some policy considerations the other way.
At the last convention, each state had its own roll call. And I particularly remember, and if the young lady out there ever listened to this, reach out to me because I want to know who you are. The New Jersey contingent was particularly funny in their roll call moment in Orlando. Yeah. I, however, got sort of a mixed reaction because I asked people, and this is kind of the fundamental to your efforts here. I asked people to go home, to turn off the computer, to get up out of their homes, to take to the streets, to interact with people who are not libertarian fabulous, to bring a personal message to folks that can only be conveyed on a personal level to what libertarianism means to us. And to move beyond, the term I'll use now is navel gazing, my words, not yours, that occurs within so many libertarians as we all try to out-libertarian each other, as we all try to find new ways to, and again, my word, not yours, bloviate on social media, when in fact there's a big wide world out there that we have to ever live in the libertarian utopian paradise that we want, all right, that we have to go out and convince, and we have to preach to. How fundamental is that hands-on effort going to be to supporting your proposed campaign for the United States Senate?
Well, first of all, I have to say I completely agree with you that us talking in the echo chamber of Facebook, for example, doesn't change hearts and minds. It doesn't change policy, and I'm not interested in a litmus test. I'm interested in what people are doing to promote liberty in their neighborhoods with their friends and families. And, we have to proselytize. That's what we have to do, So a real good campaign is, yes, we get the media attention. Yes, we do the social media, but we also need, you're absolutely right. We need to be out there talking to our friends, talking to our neighbors, and getting them to understand what government means to them and what it's doing to them in their lives and why they should reconsider that. I've told this story before, so I apologize if you've heard it, but, a year ago, I was getting my hair cut, and I was talking to my stylist, who I've had for a long time, and she's an immigrant to this country, I think about 60, very nice, mild-mannered woman, but she says to me, what is libertarian? What does that mean? And I said, well, it means that I think that you should be able to live without the government telling you what to do and giving you your business all the time. And it means peace, and it means that we're nice to each other, and the law is about taking care, making sure people aren't stealing your stuff and causing you harm. But other than that it really should be limited. And she still didn't quite understand what I meant. So I said, well, you're cutting my hair right now. Didn't you have to go and get a license to do that? And she said, yes. And I said, well, how much did that cost you? And she tells me. And I said, well, how much did going to school cost you? And she tells me it's like thousands of dollars, and it's becoming more expensive in California. And in fact, to the point where young people have to take loans to go to cosmetology school to learn to get a haircut. And I said to her, don't you think you should be allowed to cut my hair without asking the government permission? And at this point, like, everybody in the salon was listening to me, And I said, look, if you do a bad job, I'm not going to die, you know?
Right.
I'll just have a bad haircut for a little bit. Like, why do you need the government to control your education on this, to take a part of your money and to make you be licensed in this? What good does that do, except that they're taking from you? And she says to me, well, I hadn't thought about it, but yeah, you're right. Why do I need to have a license for this? And I said, well, that is what libertarianism is about. It's about us saying that you should be free to cut my hair if I agree with, without the government being involved.
All I can say is run, Alicia, run. How can folks, we only got a couple minutes left, but how can folks find you? And again, this is, you're in the exploratory stage, so that we honor all the federal regulations right now, because God forbid I should say the wrong thing. It could trigger all sorts of dystopic, events. But how can folks get behind you at this initial stage, show their support, and let's get the ball rolling in Missouri?
So right now what we have is a Facebook page called Alicia Dearn for Senate. If you go to the Facebook page, there is a link to a CrowdPack page. CrowdPack is a way for us to take recommendations, people who endorse me, and also to take pledges for donating to us. And of course, we keep track of everybody who's on the Facebook page and on CrowdPack who wants to volunteer. So go there, pledge some money, let me know that you have support, and then I don't think we take the money until it's official that I'm going to run. So but this is how we know that you're interested, that you would support me, and that you would like to see me do this race.
Excellent. Folks, you've been listening to Alicia Dearn, Prospective candidate in the exploratory stages, for the United States Senate, running as an L. Yes, that's a libertarian. Ultimately, the election will come down to her versus one Claire McCaskill. And the choice is clear. If you're a libertarian and you listen to this broadcast tonight, or you have the opportunity, you grace us with a moment to listen this weekend or next week, reach out to Alicia, give her your moral support. Just as importantly, be willing to pledge a little bit of the do-re-mi. I think we've proven in other political parties, whether it be going back to that guy who was screaming from Vermont, what was it guy, Howard Dean, on up to the Bernie Sanders campaign, that a lot of people donating a little bit of money all of a sudden gives us a microphone, a voice, a place at the stage, the bully pulpit. Hell, I can go on with cliches for hours. But if we proved anything during the Mark Wicks effort, and it was a noble effort, is that folks from across the country have more than just a tangible connection to the libertarian reality that we all hope to promote. And it's by getting behind campaigns like Alicia Dearn's that we have an opportunity to move that forward in a constructive, productive sense. The time is now. We are the right solution. We are right. It's time. Let's do it.